They told me it was just a minor procedure, nothing to worry about. But as I lay there in a cold hospital bed on Christmas Eve, barely able to breathe from the pain tearing through my abdomen, the only thing my mother said over FaceTime was, "Rachel, don't make this dramatic. We're already boarding. Billy Joel doesn't play every year, you know." I was bleeding internally. My twins were 2 years old, coloring on the hospital floor with crayons handed to them by a nurse. I didn't know if I was going to survive the night, and my parents were boarding a plane to Los Angeles for a concert that they waited months for. That call shattered something in me, something I'd been patching together with blind loyalty and monthly money transfers for years. For 3 years straight, I'd been sending them $3,000 a month, paying their mortgage, covering their groceries, their lake house maintenance, all while raising 2 babies alone after my husband died in a highway collision. And the moment I needed them most, the moment I was staring down emergency surgery, with no one to take care of my children, they vanished. I'd begged them to help, told them I had no one else. They didn't even flinch. "You always need something, Rachel," my dad had muttered. "You're exhausting." I remember gripping my phone, fingers trembling as I ended that call. I felt more than fear. I felt humiliation, anger, and a sense of betrayal so sharp it eclipsed the pain in my body. It was in that moment I realized what needed to be done. I called the nurse back in and whispered, "Can you bring me my phone one more time?" With a few taps, I canceled the automatic bank transfer to my parents. Then I typed a message I never thought I'd have the courage to send. Effective immediately, "I will no longer be financially supporting you. My children deserve better. Don't contact me again." I didn't know how they'd react. I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't their daughter. I was my children's mother. And I was done being their backup plan. Snow had started falling heavily in Denver, blanketing the streets outside St. Mary's Medical Center in layers of quiet white. Inside, the sterile light of the emergency room buzzed over my head, but all I could hear was the soft breathing of my 2-year-old twins, curled up beside my gurney with a worn stuffed giraffe and a plastic fire truck between them. It was Christmas Eve, my first without Mike. 6 months ago, he kissed my forehead before heading out to pick up diapers and almond milk, and never came back. A semi-truck driver drunk and running a red light changed everything in less than 3 seconds. Since then, every breath felt heavier, every hour felt longer. I was a widow at 34, a single mother of 2, and now a patient waiting for emergency surgery. The pain in my lower abdomen had been gnawing at me for days, brushed off as grief or stress, until I collapsed on the kitchen floor that afternoon while trying to reheat mac and cheese for the kids. I'd called 911 in a panic. The paramedics thought it might be a ruptured ovarian cyst or internal bleeding. Whatever it wasn't going to wait. As they wheeled me through triage, the nurses tried their best to keep me calm. But I couldn't think about me. I couldn't think about my body. All I could think about was Liam and Lily. Who would watch them if I went into surgery tonight? What if something went wrong? Who would hold them if I didn't wake up? There was only one option left: my parents. I hadn't wanted to call them. Hadn't wanted to hear that mix of obligation and annoyance in my mother's voice, or the tired sarcasm in my father's tone. But I was out of time, out of choices, so I dialed. The phone rang and rang, until my mom finally answered with a grin and said, "Rachel, not now, we're boarding Billy Joel. Remember, we've talked about this for months." I could barely speak through the pain, but I managed, "Mom, I'm in the ER. They think it's internal bleeding. I need surgery. I need someone to take the twins, please." She sighed, actually sighed. "Rachel, you always do this. You're not the only one with a life, you know." My stomach churned, not from the bleeding, but from the way her words sliced through me, sharper than any scalpel. My father chimed in from behind her. "She's just being dramatic again. Come on, Linda, we're going to miss the flight." And then they hung up. They hung up. I stared at the screen, heartbeat pounding louder than the monitors next to me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the searing pain in my abdomen, or the moment I realized that I could die on this table tonight, and my parents wouldn't even miss the opening act. Lying there under the humming fluorescent lights, I couldn't stop the flood of memories clawing their way into my mind, memories I had spent years trying to bury. Pain has a way of pulling things to the surface, and as my body burned from the inside out, another ache, one far older, settled into my chest. I was never enough. Not for my parents, not once. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in a 2-story brick house with blue shutters and a yard my dad was too proud of, I learned early how invisible I was. My younger sister, Kelsey, could do no wrong. She was the golden child, the straight A student, the cheer captain, the bright future they pinned their hopes on. Me, I was the girl who colored outside the lines and paid for it. When I brought home a third-place science fair ribbon in 4th grade, my dad said third, so we thought 2 people did better. When I got my driver's license on the first try, my mom didn't even look up from her magazine. But when Kelsey learned how to microwave popcorn without burning it, they threw her a freaking mini celebration. By high school, I'd stopped trying. I knew the game. No matter what I did, it would never shine as brightly as whatever Kelsey touched. She got a new car for her 16th birthday, a cherry red convertible with a white bow. I got my cousin's old Honda with 160,000 miles on it, and I paid the insurance myself. When I graduated college, summa cum laude, mind you, they sent a card. No call, no visit. Why? Because Kelsey had landed a commercial gig for a toothpaste brand that weekend, and everyone was too excited to focus on anything else. Even my wedding to Mike didn't matter. We invited them, sure. They came, complained about the food, complained the venue was too far from home. They left early. They missed our first dance. The day I gave birth to Liam and Lily was the first time I thought maybe they'd finally see me, that they'd look at my children and realize I mattered, that I had built something beautiful despite never being poured into. They showed up once, held the twins for 5 minutes, told me I looked tired, and then left because the babies were too noisy. Still, I kept trying. I kept calling on holidays. I kept mailing them birthday gifts. And when they called me 3 years ago, saying they were retiring early and could use a little help, I didn't think twice. $3,000 every month, like clockwork. While I worked 2 jobs and sold off pieces of our savings after Mike died, just to stay afloat. But deep down I knew I wasn't giving out of love, I was giving out of hope. Hope that maybe, if I filled the gap long enough, they'd finally meet me halfway. Instead, they left me bleeding on a hospital bed and chose a concert. And suddenly, all those memories, every ignored birthday, every cutting remark, every forgotten accomplishment felt like prelude, like this moment had been written a long time ago, and I was just the only one who hadn't seen the ending coming. A quiet knock tapped against the curtain of my hospital room. Nurse Bethany stepped in, her expression soft but focused. "Rachel, I just got off the phone with Claire. She'll be here in 30 minutes. She used to work in pediatric trauma care. She's incredible with kids. You'll be okay." I nodded slowly, the morphine barely dulling the edges of pain, cutting through my abdomen. I could still hear my parents' voices ringing in my ears. Not because they said anything kind or reassuring, but because they didn't. They had made their choice, and now I had to make mine. "Bethany," I whispered hoarsely, my throat dry and tight. "Can you bring me my phone again?" She placed it gently in my hand and stepped back, respecting my space. With trembling fingers, I opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the scheduled transfer, $3,000 set, to go out on the 1st of every month like clockwork. I stared at that number, that symbol of blind loyalty, that leash I had willingly worn. Then I canceled it, just like that. I cut the cord, but it wasn't enough, not this time. I opened my text messages. My hands were slick with sweat, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline fury and heartbreak. I typed slowly, making sure every word counted. Effective immediately, "I will no longer be financially supporting you. My children and I deserve better than being an afterthought. Please do not contact me again." I stared at the message for a long time, then hit send. A strange calm washed over me, like stepping into cold water, sharp, startling, but somehow cleansing. All my life, I had been taught that boundaries were betrayal, that to say no to family was selfish, that being a good daughter meant handing over your time, your energy, your money, yourself. But I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a mother. And no one was going to put my children second, while demanding to be put first. Claire arrived exactly when Bethany said she would. Warm smile, gentle voice, and an immediate connection with Liam and Lily. Within minutes, she had them both giggling as she handed out stickers and showed them how to fold paper into little boats. Bethany leaned in and whispered, "She's the best there is. And don't worry about money right now. We'll figure things out after surgery." I tried to thank her, but my voice cracked because for the first time in years, someone had shown up for me. Not because they owed me, not because I paid them, but simply because they cared. And in that fragile moment, hooked up to Ivy's heart monitor beeping, softly beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Power. The surgery lasted over 3 hours. When I finally woke up, groggy and aching, the sterile light of the hospital room blurred at the edges of my vision. I was alive but weak. Every breath felt heavy. Every movement stabbed like a knife through my abdomen. But what hit me hardest was the absence of my parents. Not a call, not a text asking if I made it, not a single word. Instead, my phone buzzed with 27 missed calls from them and a flood of text messages. But none of them said, "Are you okay?" or "How are the kids?" They said things like, "What is this nonsense about cutting us off? The bank just called mortgage didn't go through. You need to fix that. We've already paid for the cruise in January. It's non-refundable, Rachel." I stared at those words with disbelief. My body was stitched together from the inside out, and all they cared about was a trip to the Bahamas. Then Kelsey reached out. Her message was different. "Mom and Dad said you had some routine checkup. Now they're freaking out about money." What's going on? It was like a switch flipped. They hadn't just abandoned me, they'd lied about me. They'd told Kelsey it was nothing, that I was being melodramatic again, that I was guilting them over a minor appointment. So I told her the truth. Every detail, the pain, the emergency surgery, the the hospital room on Christmas Eve, the twins coloring quietly in a corner while I faced the possibility of dying alone. She replied almost instantly, "Rachel, I had no idea. I swear if I knew I would have come. I would have taken the kids. I'm so sorry. They didn't tell me anything." For a moment, I didn't know what to believe. But as I read her messages, line after line of confusion, anger, regret, I realized something. Kelsey wasn't cruel. She was just raised by the same people I was. She had lived her whole life being told she was special, while being fed stories about why I wasn't. Maybe now, she was starting to see the cracks. But my parents, they doubled down. The next day, they showed up at my apartment. I wasn't even home yet. Claire had taken the kids back for the night, and I was still in recovery. They left a note on my door, scribbled in haste. "We need to talk. You're being unreasonable. Don't make us bring this to the rest of the family." And they did. By that evening, an email from my father had landed in every family member's inbox. A long, winding rant about how I had abandoned them, cut them off in their time of need, and used surgery as an excuse to withhold support. He painted me as cold, ungrateful, irresponsible. What he didn't include, that I was recovering from emergency surgery, that they'd refused to help with their only grandchildren, that I'd been paying their bills for 3 years while barely surviving myself. It was a smear campaign, a tantrum in disguise. But they had underestimated something, me, because I wasn't the same daughter they used to guilt into silence. I had nothing left to lose, and for the first time, I had people willing to stand beside me. Recovery wasn't linear, but it was mine. The first few weeks after surgery were a blur. Painkillers, checkups, slow walks around my apartment, while Claire gently encouraged Liam and Lily to use their inside voices and reminded me not to lift anything heavier than a juice box. My abdomen throbbed every time I reached for a blanket or shifted too quickly. But compared to what I'd carried before, the weight of disappointment, of obligation, of being invisible, this pain felt almost purposeful. I was rebuilding, not just my health, but my life. Claire had become more than a nanny. She was a lifeline. She stayed overnight the first few days so I could rest. She organized the twins' toys. She made them laugh until they fell over giggling. The kids loved her, and I did too. In that silent way, you love someone who walks into the burning wreckage of your life and doesn't flinch. My graphic design clients had been surprisingly compassionate. Most of them offered flexible deadlines when I explained the situation. Some even sent flowers. For the first time, I wasn't scrambling to meet expectations I never set. I had space to breathe. Then came a moment that would change everything. I logged into one of my old project folders and found the memorial website I had made for Mike. After the funeral, something I'd built late at night, while crying softly over my keyboard. It had a photo gallery, a song he loved, a message board where friends had left stories about him. I hadn't touched it in months, but looking at it again, I saw how much love and thought I had poured into it. It was beautiful and raw, and I wondered, what if this could help someone else? I reached out to a few members of my grief support group, an online forum Bethany had connected me with. I posted a sample asking if anyone needed a memorial site for a loved one. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, I had 5 commissions. Within a month, I was booking more work than I could handle alone. Designing memorials gave me something I hadn't felt in so long: purpose. Not just creating pretty things for faceless brands, but honoring real lives. helping others heal while I healed too. With the financial pressure easing, I sat down and finally looked at my options. My apartment, once cramped and cluttered, had never felt like home. It was a space I had chosen in panic right after Mike's death, simply because I could afford it. But now with the $3,000, I wasn't sending my parents every month. I had room to think bigger. That's when I met Diana. She was a fellow widow from the support group, smart, funny, and a real estate agent. Her husband had passed from cancer 2 years earlier, leaving her with a 3-year-old and a lot of questions about life. We connected immediately. Diana helped me evaluate the market. Turns out I had more equity in the apartment than I thought. Within 2 months, she helped me close on a cozy 3-bedroom bungalow in a family-friendly neighborhood on the outskirts of Portland. It had a small yard, a swing set someone had left behind, and windows that let the sun spill across the hardwood floors like something out of a painting. The day we moved in, neighbors came by with lasagna, fresh baked bread, and handwritten notes. I cried that night, not from sadness, but from something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was peace. Maybe it was the feeling of planting roots for the first time in my life, without waiting for someone else to approve it. The kids had a yard. I had a home. Claire still helped part-time. Kelsey started visiting on weekends, slowly building a real relationship with her niece and nephew. She no longer defended our parents. She just showed up, asked how I was doing, and actually listened. My world had changed, not in a flash, not through some miracle, but because I finally said no to being someone else's doormat, and yes to being my own foundation. This wasn't a comeback. This was a beginning. It was a Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. Claire was out running errands with the twins, and I was knee-deep in editing a photo slideshow for a memorial site when I heard the chime. I glanced at the camera feed on my phone, and my stomach dropped. There they were, my parents, standing on my new porch like ghosts from a life I'd already buried. My father, in his usual khakis and pressed polo, clutched a manila folder. My mother stood beside him, arms crossed, her designer purse still dangling from her wrist like a badge of misplaced pride. I almost didn't open the door. But curiosity got the better of me. I cracked it just enough to look them in the eye. "What do you want?" I asked, flat and controlled. My mother forced a smile. "Rachel, honey, we just want to talk. It's been months." "We're worried," my father added, his tone sliding between indignation and desperation. "You haven't responded to anything. You won't even let us see the kids." "You mean the kids you wouldn't take when I was in emergency surgery?" They both flinched, and for once neither of them had a ready excuse. My father sighed, holding up the folder. "Look, we're in trouble. Financially, we need your help." I stared at him. I already helped for 3 years, while raising 2 babies and mourning my husband. "What did you do with that money?" He looked away. My mother jumped in. We made investments, took on a second mortgage. We assumed we'd be fine." "Assumed I'd keep paying your bills forever," I snapped. She stepped forward. "Rachel, we're going to lose the house." "Sell the boat," I said without hesitation. My father stiffened. "We'd take a huge loss. Then sell the timeshare." "The market's terrible," my mother muttered, avoiding my eyes. I stared at them both. "So you came here, not to apologize, not to ask about my health, not to see the twins, but to show me a spreadsheet and beg for money." My father opened the folder and slid it toward me. Inside was a breakdown of their debt, $144,000 behind on mortgage payments, credit card bills stacked, late fees piling up. "We need a bailout," he said quietly. It took everything in me not to laugh. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, letting the question hang heavy in the air. They shifted uncomfortably, but didn't answer. Right then, Claire's car pulled into the driveway. The twins tumbled out Lily, clutching her pink giraffe. Liam running ahead, with his arms out like airplane wings. My parents turned to look at them like strangers. They hadn't seen those children in over a year. "There they are," my mother gasped, her voice going high and sugary. "There's my baby girl." Lily blinked at her, unsure. I stepped in front of her. "Don't. They don't know you. You chose that." "Rachel," my father started, his voice hardening. "You can't just erase your parents." "I'm not erasing you. I'm remembering you accurately," I said quietly but firmly. "I begged you for help. You had concert tickets. I begged again. You had a cruise. And now you're begging me because the bank won't wait." His face darkened. "This isn't fair." "No," I said. "It's consequences." They left without another word. The next day they returned with reinforcements. My Aunt Carol stood at the door, now the so-called peacemaker of the family. She knocked with that cloying voice she always used when trying to guilt someone into compliance. "Sweetheart, your parents are hurting. They're just not good with money, you know that. They managed for 35 years before I started covering their bills," I said flatly. "They chose to retire early. They chose the lifestyle. I'm not fixing it." She paused. "But family?" "No," I cut her off. "Real family shows up when you're bleeding in a hospital bed, not just when their credit card is maxed out." Later that evening, a new group email hit my inbox from my father again. It was a last-ditch Hail Mary to smear me across. "The extended family claims that I was vindictive, cruel, abandoning them after everything they'd sacrificed. But the truth, he forgot how many people saw them flaunt that new boat last summer. He forgot my cousin Marcus works at the same bank they defaulted at. He forgot that some of us actually talk to each other." Within hours, replies poured in. Questions, doubts, outrage, and then silence. The myth they built was crumbling. Not because I screamed louder, but because this time I didn't say anything at all. The facts spoke for me, and people were finally listening. 3 weeks after that email storm, I was making grilled cheese for the twins when Kelsey called. Her voice was tight. "They got the foreclosure notice." I froze mid-stir, the butter hissing on the pan. "Already? The bank's giving them 60 days to vacate unless they can pay the full amount." She paused. "They're in panic mode, Rachel. Complete meltdown." I didn't respond. I just watched the cheese bubble and burn slightly at the edges. "They've got nothing left," she added. "Retirement accounts drained, credit cards maxed, the boat's gone. Timeshare finally sold for less than half what they paid." "Let me guess," I said quietly. "They want me to fix it." There was a long silence. "I'm not saying you should," Kelsey finally said. "I just thought you'd want to know." Later that night, my phone lit up again, this time with texts not even trying to pretend anymore. My mother's message read like a desperate confession. "We didn't think you'd actually cut us off. We thought you'd cool off and go back to normal. Please, we're scared." Scared. The same people who left me terrified and alone in a hospital bed were now scared of losing their house. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication maybe, but instead I felt tired, just tired, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about clarity. They hadn't changed. They'd just run out of options. They'd assumed, even in crisis, that I'd always put their comfort above my sanity. That guilt would override logic. That family meant obligation, no matter the cost. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was a mother who'd survived a funeral surgery betrayal and the slow suffocation of always being second. And I'd rebuild something stronger. Claire, Diana, my clients, the parents from the grief group, even Kelsey. That was my family now. Not bound by blood, but by effort, by reciprocity, by presence. So I didn't answer my parents. Instead, I sat on the floor of our new living room, surrounded by wooden building blocks and giggles. Liam stacked towers while Lily knocked them down. Claire made cocoa in the kitchen. The fireplace glowed. This was peace. And when Kelsey texted me later that week to say she'd moved them into a small rental condo, half the size of their lake house with no view and no granite countertops, I didn't feel sorry for them. I felt sorry for the time I'd wasted believing love could be bought with sacrifice. They'd taught me a lesson they never meant to deliver. You're not selfish for choosing peace. You're responsible for deciding who gets to stay in your life and who doesn't. That's not betrayal, that's boundaries, and boundaries are love wearing armor. A few months after settling into our new home, something unexpected happened. I got an email from a woman named Celeste. She'd seen one of the memorial websites I designed for a mutual friend in the grief group, one I'd poured my heart into for a father who'd passed during the pandemic. Celeste wrote, "You don't know me, but your work brought me peace. Would you ever consider doing one for my mom? I don't have much, but I just want something beautiful to remember her by." I didn't hesitate. I told her yes. By the time I finished Celeste's project, I had a new idea, one that had been bubbling under the surface without me realizing it. What if these websites weren't just services? What if they were healing tools? That night, I opened a blank Word document and began drafting what would become my next chapter, Roots and Remembrance. A small digital memorial studio focused entirely on creating safe personal spaces for grieving families. Photo galleries, voice recordings, custom-designed quote images, even spaces for private journaling. It started slow, just a few clients from the grief support circle. But word spread. I found myself working with widows, cancer survivors, even a father who lost his teenage son in a car crash. Every story was different. Every site was sacred. But what caught me off guard was how much it healed me too. Every time I helped someone preserve love in digital form, I rewrote the ending of my own story just a little. I realized that pain doesn't always shrink, but it becomes lighter when shared. Then one Saturday morning, Diana brought up an idea that would stretch me in a completely new direction. "You ever thought about starting a podcast?" she asked, sipping coffee, while our kids fought over a swing in the backyard. I blinked. "A podcast?" "Yeah, about toxic family dynamics, recovery, reinvention, boundaries, stuff you've lived and breathed. You tell stories like nobody else. People need to hear them." I laughed at first, then paused, because deep down, I knew she was right. That night, I stayed up recording a voice memo into my phone. Just me in my closet, whispering a story about the time my mother pretended to forget my college graduation date because Kelsey had auditions that week. It was raw, messy, but real. 2 weeks later, the first episode of Toxic Ties, Stories of Boundaries and Breakthroughs, went live. I didn't expect anyone to listen, but by the end of the month, it had thousands of downloads. People messaged me with stories of their own. Siblings who'd gone no contact. Children who had cut ties with abusive parents. Women who'd been told for decades that family is everything, until they realized that sometimes family is the wound. the community grew faster than I could have imagined. And for the first time, I was doing something bigger than survival. I was leading healing, and just when I thought my life had settled into its new rhythm, something small but profound happened. A young single mother named Renee emailed me through my business site. She was struggling, no family, no partner, just her and her toddler, and a stack of grief she didn't know what to do with. She couldn't afford my services, but she just wanted to talk. We met for coffee. And I saw myself in her 2 years earlier, fractured, exhausted, determined. So I built her a memorial site for free. I gave her Claire's number, and I told her the thing I had once needed someone to say to me. You're not broken, you're building. That was the moment I realized something powerful. The legacy I was creating wasn't built from the family I came from. It was built from the one I chose, one woman, one story, one survivor at a time. Looking back now, not just at the pain, but at the journey through it, there are things I wish someone had told me sooner. Things I had to learn the hard way. And maybe, just maybe, if you're listening to this, you're standing in the same kind of storm I once was, waiting for someone to give you permission to walk away from what's hurting you. So let me say it plainly. Blood doesn't make someone safe. We're taught that family is everything, that it's sacred, unbreakable. But here's the truth. No one wants to say out loud some of the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from people with your last name. And you are allowed to walk away from anyone who makes you feel small, forgotten, or unworthy, even if they share your DNA. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. When I said no more, my parents called it betrayal. They said I was heartless, ungrateful. But the truth, boundaries are how we protect our peace. They are how we say, this far, no further. Setting one might cause an earthquake, but that's because the ground you've been standing on was never stable to begin with. You can survive without the people you thought you needed. I didn't think I could raise twins alone. I didn't think I could grieve without someone holding me up. But I learned that community is not always inherited, it's built. Through grace, through courage, through showing up for yourself first, and then letting the right people find their way to you. Pain doesn't define you. What you do with it does. I could have let bitterness take root. I could have let their betrayal become the loudest voice in my story. But instead, I used it as fuel. I turned heartbreak into healing for myself and for others. And that's power. Saying no to them was saying yes to me. Yes to rest. Yes to peace. Yes to parenting with presence instead of resentment. Yes to building something real, even if it looked nothing like what I thought family would be. So if you're still wondering whether it's okay to let go of the people who keep letting you down, hear me when I say this. You are not responsible for fixing anyone else's mess. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not broken for needing space. And you are not alone. You're building something better, brick by brick, choice by choice, and when it's done, it will be yours. Not perfect, but real, and that's the kind of family that lasts.